So, yeah, this one's gonna be tough to explain. And by tough, I mean the entire concept of this video is probably gonna be enough to send a serf from the Middle Ages into epileptic shock. There really is no easy segue into this video's topic, so let me put it on you straight. What the hell even is a Tumblr sexy man? If you've wasted enough time on the internet in recent years, chances are you already have a pretty good idea of what it means for a character to be a Tumblr sexy man to begin with, or at the very least, you've seen at least one or two of them in passing. You got your classics like the onceler, Jack Frost from that one movie, the entire cast of Ace Attorney, Jack Skellington, and of course, even more recent ones like my goat Gagan Arataka from Mob Psycho 100. And of course, by recent, I mean the Mob Psycho came out like 8 years ago. Yeah, that one guy from Undertale really was onto something, wasn't he? Anyway, with characters like these, I'm pretty sure you already see a recurring theme here. Pale, usually at least somewhat tallish, and a physique that makes it look like you can snap them over your knee like a twig regardless of whether or not you're actually physically fit. And while traits like these tend to be pretty common, especially back in the early 2010s with the onceler, aka patient zero of the Tumblr sexy man epidemic, but let's just say things have gotten wacky since 2012. Nowadays, you got guys like Sans Undertale, Spamton, and Jevil Deltarune, Pepino Spaghetti from Pizza Tower, Senshi from Dungeon Meshi, the Peanut Butter Jelly Time Banana for that one Roblox game, this one guy from Trolls 3. Hell, if you want to go, the only more conventional options by 2012 standards, it's a literal goddamn triangle, is what I would have said if things weren't always kinda like this. Phil Cypher, the aforementioned goddamn Triangle of Legend, has had the internet in a chokehold ever since his debut, and much like Reagan Arataka, he comes from a show that ended a decent while back. Look, Gravity Falls came out 3 months after the lorax movie, I'm just saying. Granted, our pal William here didn't get his debut until about a year after the show's first episode, but even so, he's not too much younger than Mr. How Bad Can I Be over here. As for Mr. Nagito, Fingers in His Ass Komaeda, Danganronpa 2 also came out back in 2012. Did you think Nagito would have been around for longer than Sans? Probably not unless you're a Turbo Weeb or something, but hey, at least Sans has the benefit of being from a franchise that's actually good, so hey, that's gotta count for something, right? In any case, while the archetypal suited twink with a top hat and or bow tie is a character design trope that's been around for ages, as made evident by some of the other characters I've listed previously, it's far from a requirement. Because, you see, as the term Tumblr sexy man obviously suggests, Tumblr sexy men have their roots deeply embedded in internet and more specifically, Tumblr culture, and as you all likely know by now, Tumblr is really fucking gay, and that shows in the taste of men. Or, instead of gay, should I say queer. Not just queer in the literal sense, although that does play a part in it, but queer in the original meaning of the word sense. Wacky, out there, abnormal, which out of context sounds kinda crazy, but hey, I'm about as straight as a parabolist, so I think I get a pass here. Now, as I've said at length before in one of my previous videos, Tumblr was basically ground zero for angsty loser teenagers who had nowhere else to go because if they acted like how they wanted to in real life, chances are they'd be pelted with rocks, tomatoes, and or quite possibly killed with hammers, hence why it's called a hell site. Come on, if you gather up a bunch of gay loser teenagers and dump them all into the same setting, let's just say you're bound to see something absolutely rancid eventually. It's like the one thing you can count on regardless of the time period. Which was, of course, a total shame, but hey, look at the bright side, at least got some killer memes in the process. Throughout the entire website's existence, Tumblr has been knee-deep, quite possibly chest-deep in counterculture, so much so that back in the day, people used to dunk on it if it was even brought up in passing, but now, it's basically one of the few normalist social media platforms left out there. But, I digress. In any case, as one would expect out of a website founded on the idea of counterculture, the same thing would of course go over the things its user base would consider attractive. And like I said, if you had a Tumblr back in the late 2000s and early 2010s, more often than not, you were probably into a few things that were scaring away the bitches. Musical theater, alternative fashion, numerous genres of indie music, anime, horror and horror adjacent media, and a whole lot of other stuff, but case in point, all of that shit tends to be at least kinda gay. If you look at it a certain way, the Tumblr sexy man is an archetype born to the invasion of what most people in the mainstream would consider popular. You see, in the mid to late 2000s, boy bands and artists like Justin Timberlake were really popular. And so, you had your bitch repellent equivalents like My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, and Panic at the Disco. Now, as much as I would love to elaborate upon that point, I did already do a video on gay people music in the past, so if this does good enough, I might remake that. My point being, however, that this philosophy and attractiveness, an invasion of what most people would consider conventionally attractive at the time, was illustrated by none other than the one thing that Illumination Studios will never truly be able to live down besides Despicable Me 3. Patient zero of the sexy man epidemic himself, the onceler for the lorax movie. However, in order for me to explain why he was such a hit, I first have to explain why he even looked like that to begin with. In the simplest terms I can possibly put it, Illumination Studios likes money a lot, and in order to make that money, they had to appeal to some kind of target demographic in order to make sure the films they make break even. The same goes to every other creative work that ever exists, you know how that goes. On one hand, it'd be pretty easy to make a one-to-one recreation of the original lorax animation from the 70s, however, you'd also have only 25 minutes of story to work with, which, as you all know, isn't a whole lot by movie standards. Their solution appealed to the younger demographic. Yada yada, making the musical, age up the protagonist and give him a motorcycle, give him a love interest cause why not, and add an evil corporate antagonist to try to home the point of the whole environmental message, you get the picture. Now, not only that, but in the original story, the Onceler's face is kept completely obscured, intentionally. So the boys over at the Illumination figured it would be a good idea to expand upon his backstory so the plot has a little more meat on his bones, which by all accounts isn't too bad of an idea by itself. Wham bam boom, give him a musical number where he sells out, have him go through twink death, and a few decades later he meets the protagonist and give him the last truffle tree seed so he can go on and end global warming and save the world. Surely something as innocuous as this wouldn't go on to have lasting consequences, right? Right? Well, you see, as much as I'd love to say this was some kind of grand scheme by Illumination to get people to watch your lorax, unfortunately, the Onceler's fate was sealed the second The Nightmare Before Christmas was released back in '93. By all means, the Onceler is far from the first instance of a character that fits the term Tumblr sexyman to ever exist. And like, yeah, I might have been in the first grade when this guy hit the scene, but while doing research for this vid, Jesus fucking Christ, Tumblr descended upon this twink like hawks. And granted, the Onceler fandom didn't exactly last as long as people said it did, but by God, you can still feel its effects to this day for a reason. You see, besides the typical lanky twink in his early to mid-20s that's good at music, dressed in the suit, and has an angsty, otherwise tragic backstory, the Onceler and his fanbase is a brilliant illustration of something that I've been dying to talk about for a while now, as seen by my previous few videos. The lorax movie might be why he exists, but the fandom? Let's just say they didn't watch the movie for the plot. The reason why the Onceler is so incredibly infamous today isn't because the lorax is just that good of a movie, but rather, the Onceler was the perfect medium for 2010's Tumblr to project all their wacky ideas onto. You want evidence? Just take a look at all the fanart, AUs, ask blogs, fanfictions, and all that other wonderful, wonderful content that'll only serve to drag more and more people into the greater Onceler fandom. People who, for the most part, weren't there because they liked the lorax, but because they liked how these people drew the funny twink and his boyfriend. His boyfriend, who, mind you, also happened to be himself. Then again, it wasn't like there were that many options, but all I'm saying is, if Illumination dropped the lorax now, you'd see a lot more art of Zac Efron making that sloppy style of Danny DeVito, just saying. Never thought this movie would be the thing that would go on to introduce you to the concept of self-sex, but hey, that's not the worst thing I've learned the internet since middle school, so I'll take a liking again. Anyway, to further elaborate upon how wacky internet fangirls can be sometimes, let's fast forward a couple years to 2014 so we can talk about Undertale. Mettaton, like many people before me have stated, has clear Tumblr sexy man potential, what with its long ass legs, dramatic poses, and emphasis on music and dancing due to him canonically being an entertainer. I mean, hell, the guy even canonically puts on a dress in a musical number before going EX. However, there's a reason why I said Sans and not Mettaton in the intro. You see, just like the Onceler, Sans is an instance of the fanbase hijacking a character in order to do whatever the hell they please with him. Difference is, I was actually old enough to remember it this time around, so let's get into it. Now, if you had the pulse in 2014, you've most definitely seen this skeleton smug face around at least once, alongside such autism classics like Foxy the Pirate Fox, Bendy, Stubhead Mugman, and Baldy Basic himself. But Sans? Throughout all the comic dubs and fanfictions, Sans alone is the honest sexy man, and by all means, it doesn't make any sense on paper. Up until this point, most Tumblr sexy men have been lanky, theatrical twinks in suits, and the game makes it very clear that Sans is the exact opposite of that. If anything, his brother Papyrus fits the bill of a classical depiction of a Tumblr sexy man much more than him. He's tall, lanky, theatrical, has a wacky outfit, the list goes on, but Sans? He's like, what, 4'6" max, and he's often depicted as a lazy straight man to his brother's Royal Guard themed tryhard antics. So evidently he must have had something else going on for him if he managed to ruin an entire generation of middle schoolers, right? Yeah, it's angst. A whole lot of it too. Save for its fanbase and killer soundtrack, one of the main reasons why Undertale is still culturally relevant to this day is because of its storytelling and its incredibly rich lore. Lore which people still haven't gotten around to getting to the bottom of to this day. Long story short, despite what initial appearances may suggest, there's a lot more to Sans than he lets on, especially when he pulls up on you at the Judgment Hall after you finish murdering everyone else in the underground to the genocide route. Sans all you has to draw of being a seemingly lazy character that locks the fuck in when shit gets really serious, but even so, that's not the entire picture. You also have the subtle nods to his past and more serious nature, like when he casually drops a notorial on you right at a restaurant. The machine of unknown origin that's behind his house for some reason, and the speech that he drops on you before beating your ass for at least 10 minutes straight depending on how good you're at the game. In a way, some could argue that Sans' nonchalant, goofy, and aloof demeanor is a form of theatrics, considering that we do know he is capable of taking things more seriously, but chooses not to for some reason, and if not, it's still something to get attached to. I mean, again, look at his brother. Silliness doesn't magically revoke his Tumblr Sexyman privileges. However, the only thing is just that Sans is a different flavor of silly. Sure, the onceler's fanbase was pretty rabid, and while I wasn't there to see it in its heyday, I had front row seats to whatever the hell the Sans fangirls and greater Undertale fandom at the time had going on, and all I'm saying is, at least the onceler didn't spawn an entire genre of YouTube channels where people would make animations of him making out sloppy style of their OCs. Himself, sure, but at least with the onceler, people were keeping it somewhat contained, and for the most part, people wanted to see old onceler get yallyful of someone else. Sans, though, not only did they want him with other characters, not only did they want him with other universe versions of himself, people wanted him! Excluding Let's Plays, and as much as it pains me to say it, Homestuck, I can guarantee you that at least one of you people here watching this knows at least one person that got into Undertale because of this short bastard. Now, me personally, I knew of the game's existence through cultural osmosis, however, I didn't really start caring about it until I started watching those comic dubs and footnote compilations, so hey, you might want to take that as you will. All of that aside, I say all of this due to one thing. Despite his appearance differing from what most would consider a typical Tumblr sexy man to be, Sans is still one of the biggest Tumblr sexy men out there, and for good reason, because, well, he still fits the definition. Sans is a character with an unreasonably large and vocal fanbase that considers him attractive despite the current standards of mainstream pop culture because, as you all know by now, culture is subject to change. Twinks and suits were big back in the day, but as of right now, people love their old man Yari. There's a reason why people lost their minds over Bandit for Bluey, and I can still see Sentry's crotch on my feed every so often. The people who liked Twinks got older, and thus, their taste changed to something more mature in comparison, guys that work office jobs and hairy middle-aged elderly men. Hell, both the Stance and Gravity Falls are seeing a huge resurgence in popularity recently, and while they did have their fans back in the day, I won't lie and say that this shift in the Tumblr sexy man meta hasn't helped them. And on the topic of times are changing, it would only be a matter of time till people would try to reverse engineer the formula and make some Tumblr sexy men of their own. Listen, I'm not gonna lie to you here because 1, I have friends who like hazbin hotel, and 2, I got a life so I don't exactly have the time to watch it. Now, I'm well aware that aesthetically Hazbin's going for a 1920s Broadway look, which is made even more obvious by the fact that Alistar is literally called the Radio Devil. However, please consider the following. I love me some slander. With all that out the way, I can very confidently say that there is a very clear target demographic here, and I think that's kinda obvious. I mean, come on. This entire show is absolutely flooded with characters that'll make a scene kid in 2009 explode into glitter. Now, I'm not gonna call characters like Lucifer, Alistar, and Angel Dust industry plants, but what I will say is that there is a very clear pattern here. A pattern which I have noticed over many years of wasting my life on the internet. Aura. All of it is just aura. At the end of the day, it all comes back to aura. The difference is that this time, instead of being used to describe how cool something is, it's being used to describe how attractive certain fictional characters are. And for those of you who didn't watch my last video on aura, simply put, aura is just another word for stage presence and how good a character is at grabbing the attention of the audience. Anyway, on the outside looking in, it's not too unreasonable to assume that trying to understand the fickle nature of Tumblr sexy men is not worth the effort. I spent a lot of time writing this script trying to further quantify what a Tumblr sexy man was, but in reality, sometimes terms are nebulous for a reason. If it was just a design thing, then why are characters like Sans, Bandit, Senshin, Peppino, and Wario so popular? Appearance is only a decoration. True Tumblr sexiness is an acclamation of the soul. And what's a better way to target somebody's soul than giving somebody a reason to care about them? Bandit, for example, aka Bluey's dad, had single mothers and adults watching children's entertainment everywhere in a chokehold because he's just a kind and funny guy that also happens to be an Australian dog. You can also more or less apply the same logic for Senshi from Dungeon Meshi, but unlike Bandit, people also have to love hairy man-ass these days, me included. Reagan Arataka? Yeah, he's a fraud, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but he's not a fraud. He might be a con artist, yeah, but he genuinely wants the best for the mob, and sure, while he may be a complete phony, he does give his clients some form of relief from whatever problems they may have. Also, it does kinda help that he dresses nice, and the animators just love making him saucy as hell for no reason. But Pino Spaghetti, not only is he incredibly angry, not only is he incredibly chaotic, but he also taps into the sopping wet cat market too, and like I said before, the internet loves their hairy middle-aged men. It's a growing demographic, and I've been investing in its stocks for about a year now, which is also why characters like Asgore are picking up more traction. Satoru Gojo, for the best interest of my channel, I will not be going into further detail. However, while his fanbase isn't nearly as bad as Sansa the Runslers of back in the day, let's just say they're a whole lot more descriptive. In truth, any character with a surprisingly vocal and or dedicated fanbase qualifies as a type of sexy man these days. I would say that not being conventionally attracted by the standards of mainstream pop culture helps, but again, that in itself is incredibly relative and depends on who you're asking. I can't even say anything about source materials either because, again, a type of sexy man can come from anywhere. The same way people weren't expecting to be browsing out of mouth the lorax guy, nobody was expecting anyone to go crazy over Bluey's dad of all people. Really, you could spend years in a lab cooking up a character design that'll have multiple people flooding timelines of others with fan art, but in the end, that'll only get you so far. Without people shamelessly simp for a character, they're not a Tumblr sexy man. They're just man, or maybe even just sexy if you're lucky. And you know what? That's okay, they can't all be bangers. People get attached to niche things all the time, so there's always a chance that a completely unknown character might be blessed by the greater will of the algorithm one of these days. Maybe you'll be responsible for the next generation of brain rot if you're lucky enough. There's only one way to find out, right? The sky's the limit when you don't give a shit, so grab a pencil and figure something out. What's the worst that can happen? Chase that bag, it's the only way we can kill cringe culture for good. Yeah, so I'm gonna keep it a sec. I don't really have an outro here, so yeah, I have no moral to tell here. This was just like straight 18 minutes of me yapping. Anyway, if you did enjoy what you saw, remember to like, comment, and subscribe because that really does help the engagement and all that. But in any case, for real though, thank you for coming, thank you for staying, and thank you for watching the show. Take care of yourself. Peace.